Hi, I'm Ollie Thomas from PMC. My role at the company is I am one of the CEOs, so responsible for all the operations at PMC. So behind me is the new Prophecy range of products. We brought these out. We were focusing on a multitude of design elements. We wanted to incorporate some new acoustic technologies that we had developed into them, as well as bringing out a range of products which looks sleeker, slimmer, and more refined than ever before. There is 5 models in the Pmc Prophecy range. The largest floor stander is a 3-way with twin 5-inch bass drivers called the Prophecy 9. And then there is the slightly smaller 3-way floor stander beneath that, the Prophecy 7. Prophecy 5 is the smallest 2-way floor stander. Then we have the Prophecy 1 bookshelf, and then of course the center channel. So the Prophecy series of products is designed from the ground up. Everything in them is brand new. They follow the same PMC design philosophy as all other PMC speakers, where we are focusing on super low distortion, tonal accuracy, neutrality, and we make sure that we go through an iterative design cycle of measuring, listening, and tweaking things until we're happy with the result. One of the key technologies in the Prophecy range that we're using is the use of waveguides. So I'm holding a piece from the Prophecy 9 speaker in front of me here, which is the waveguide for the mid-range and tweeter on the Prophecy 7 and 9. There are waveguides used throughout the Prophecy series, particularly on the tweeter, and we use these to control the directivity. Directivity is important to PMC. We always ensure that we have really wide directivity type designs, like a super wide off-axis response. That makes the sound so much more three-dimensional when you hear it, because all of the reflections in a room are very important to building up that three-dimensional image in your head of what you're listening to. The waveguide for the mid-range has this kind of unique profile, which is 2 different types of gradients or slopes overlapped on top of each other. We call it encompass. And the reason we do this is there are 2 different advantages that you can have depending on that slope of the mid-range waveguide. The slightly steeper slope allows us to boost the low frequencies of the mid-range, essentially allowing us to run the mid-range down to lower frequencies, which is great. We can cross over to the low frequency drive unit at about 400 or 500 hertz. And that means that we can use the mid-range from there all the way up to 4 or 5 kilohertz, which is a super wide bandwidth of frequencies. And it's where all of human speech sits within that bandwidth. The fact that you can do that all from one drive unit means that all of those sounds are far more vivid and real because they are produced from one drive unit. And then the other advantage, the slightly gentler gradient slope that you have on the mid-range waveguide, allows us to spread the sound out. So it gives it that wide directivity. So we've got wide directivity to give that kind of like a realism and depth of voice, whilst also having a drive unit that can operate over a huge bandwidth. So one of the key technologies in the Prophecy range of products is Laminaire X, which is the latest iteration and development of our Laminaire technology that we released a few years ago. Laminaire technology utilizes a device at the end of the transmission line exit, which uses aerodynamic principles to sort of clean up the airflow in and out of the cabinet, reducing chuffing noise, lowering distortion, and giving us greater bass efficiency. Laminaire X, as I'm holding one of the pieces in front of me now, is the next iteration of that. It's a patent-pending technology. The parametrics which we use to design these are carefully simulated, and essentially we end up with a device like this with more strakes, more fins of a certain length, certain distance between them, and they fully optimize the airflow out of the transmission line. The Laminaire X devices in the Prophecy speakers are made out of an extruded aluminium piece like this, which is then machined and anodized. The advantage of this is that it then gives us a lot of mass at the bottom of the speaker. So if you look at our floor stander models, we don't have any outriggers, but because we have this heavy mass at the bottom, it lowers the center of gravity of the product to stop it from toppling. So it's more stable. So I'm holding in my hand a crossover from the Prophecy 9. It's one of our 3-way crossovers, which are of the more complex designs. So there's a lot of components on the board here. Our 3-way models are 24 dB per octave designs. That allows quite a very controlled roll-off slope allowing us to use the drive units in exactly the frequency that they work best in. And that means that they sound more accurate and there's lower distortion. We've got an assortment of components on here. They're all hand selected, hand built, and the crossovers are hand built as the speakers are in the UK. We batch our components into very tight tolerance bands, again by hand by our staff in the factory in the UK. We use a selection of air core inductors and steel laminate inductors, but it's really the design of the crossover itself and the complexity, choosing the layout of where the components go so as to avoid any electromagnetic interactions between the components, which allows us to get the best performance out of our crossovers. So, why do PMC use transmission lines? All of our designs are transmission lines. We use a mixture of the quarter wave resonating pipe theory as well as a transmission line with a vent to both augment and boost the low frequency of our speakers, as well as using all of the absorption materials in the transmission line to clean up the mid-range. So for a given size enclosure, we can produce a speaker with a more extended low frequency response, which is also super low distortion. And that goes kind of hand in hand with the Laminaire X device, which takes that one step further, allows us to lower the distortion another magnitude. With this low distortion, it gives this bigger sound from a small enclosure, which is really, what we were trying to push for with the Prophecy range. As part of our holistic design approach, we take the Laminaire X and the transmission line, creating this big sound from a small box, and we couple that to the other technologies like the Encompass waveguide, which allow us to have very wide directivity of sound, which again allows for that three-dimensionality of sound. So coupling those two together, you have a very big room-filling sound from a very small speaker.